I always knew Olivia had a flair for drama, but I never thought she'd humiliate me in front of both our families. There I was sitting at the head of the table during our annual family reunion, laughter clinking glasses, stories being shared until Olivia stood up, cleared her throat, and dropped a bombshell. "I'm tired of carrying dead weight," she said, her voice sharp and cold. Then she looked straight at me. "I want a divorce." The room fell silent. My parents, my siblings, her relatives, everyone stared in shock as Olivia launched into a speech about how she funded our life, how my little teacher salary wasn't enough, and how I'd crumble without her support. I felt the heat rise to my face, not from shame, but from holding back a smile. Because what Olivia didn't know, for the past 5 years, I had been preparing for this exact moment. While she mocked me, I was building something she could never touch. You see, sometimes revenge isn't loud, it's quiet, calculated, patient. And when the time is right, it speaks for itself. Stay with me because I'm about to show you how I turned public humiliation into the best thing that ever happened to me, and why you should never underestimate a man with a plan. What would you do if your spouse betrayed you like this? Comment below, subscribe to Revenge with Chris, and let's dive into my story. I wasn't always the kind of man who planned for betrayal. No one gets married thinking they'll need an escape route. When I met Olivia, I was a fresh-faced history teacher, passionate about my work, living modestly but happily. She was ambitious, sharp, already climbing the corporate ladder in finance. We were opposites, but that's what made it exciting. At first, the first couple of years felt like a dream. Fancy dinners I couldn't really afford, spontaneous weekend getaways, all funded by Olivia's generous salary. I told myself it didn't matter who made more. We were a team, right? But somewhere along the way, admiration turned into resentment. Olivia's playful jokes about my noble but poor profession started cutting deeper. What began as light teasing at dinner parties slowly morphed into public jabs that left me swallowing my pride. I still remember the first time I truly saw the cracks. It was at a friend's wedding. Someone asked when we'd buy a house, and Olivia laughed loud enough for everyone to hear. "Well, unless Nathan's students start paying him in gold. I guess that's on me." People chuckled awkwardly. I laughed too, pretending it didn't sting. But it did. I brushed it off, telling myself she was just proud of her success. But deep down, I felt something shift. That night, she didn't apologize. In fact, she seemed pleased. Year 3 of our marriage was when the real betrayal hit. I found messages too many to ignore between Olivia and a colleague. Romantic dinners, hotel stays, lies. Wrapped in late meetings, I confronted her, heart pounding, expecting denial or at least regret. But Olivia, she was cold, dismissive. "It was nothing serious," she said, as if that made it better. "If you earned more, maybe I wouldn't have been tempted." Those words burned into my soul. I should have left right then. But like so many people blinded by love, or maybe fear, I stayed. I told myself we could fix it, that everyone makes mistakes. But that night I made a silent vow. If she ever crossed that line again, I wouldn't be the fool twice. That's when I started my quiet plan. I picked up extra tutoring gigs after school, took on summer classes when other teachers wanted a break. Every dollar went into a separate account, one Olivia didn't know existed. But that wasn't enough. I needed something bigger. I'd always loved storytelling. History wasn't just dates and facts to me. It was about people, choices, consequences. So I dusted off an old manuscript I'd toyed with in college. Late nights turned into chapters. Weekends became writing marathons under a pen name. I self-published my first historical fiction novel. It didn't make waves, but it made enough to see potential. Enough to know I wasn't trapped. Meanwhile, Olivia's behavior didn't improve. Every family gathering became a stage for her to flaunt her success and diminish mine. My parents would pull me aside, concern etched on their faces, but I'd just smile and say, "I've got it handled," because I did. By year 5, I had 2 books published, steady tutoring income, and a growing bank account that was entirely mine. And then, lightning struck. My 3rd book caught fire. Critics loved it. Readers devoured it, and suddenly I was earning more from my secret life than Olivia ever imagined. But I kept quiet. I let her believe I was still the humble teacher, barely scraping by. Why? Because I knew Olivia. I knew her pride, her greed, her need to control the narrative. All I had to do was wait for her to make the mistake I knew was coming. And when that family reunion invitation arrived, I had a feeling my patience was about to pay off. The week leading up to the family reunion felt different. Olivia was unusually distant, not the cold, passive-aggressive distance I'd grown used to, but calculated, like she was holding on to a secret she couldn't wait to unleash. I noticed the late-night phone calls, the whispered conversations when she thought I was asleep, the quick flick of her finger locking her phone whenever I walked into the room. But I didn't ask. I didn't need to. I had already accepted that Olivia wasn't just unhappy, she was scheming. And if there was one thing I'd learned over the years, it was that people like her always reveal themselves when they think they've won. When Saturday came, I drove us both to the reunion. It was tradition, both sides of the family gathering at her parents' estate, a sprawling property that Olivia loved to brag about. On the way there, she barely spoke a word. I could feel the tension radiating off her, but I kept my hands steady on the wheel, my face calm. Inside, I was counting down the moments. The afternoon passed in a blur of forced smiles and polite conversation. I could see my mother watching me closely, sensing something wasn't right. My father gave me that knowing nod, the one he reserved for moments when words weren't necessary. Then came dinner. We were all seated at the long table, candles flickering, glasses-filled plates being passed around. The usual family chatter filled the air, until Olivia stood up, tapping her fork against her glass. I knew this was it. I have something to say. She began, her voice sweet, but laced with venom. Everyone turned to look at her, expecting some cheerful announcement, maybe news of a promotion or plans for a vacation. But instead, Olivia took a deep breath and let the poison flow. For years, she said, glancing around the table, I've carried more than my fair share in this marriage. While Nathan here chose a fulfilling but financially limiting career, I've been the one making sure we live comfortably. A few awkward chuckles, my heart rate didn't budge. I'm tired of pretending everything's fine. She continued, her gaze landing on me with a smirk. I'm tired of carrying dead weight. Gasps echoed through the room. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My brother shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I want a divorce? Olivia declared, her voice firm and unapologetic. And I think it's only fair everyone knows the truth. Nathan wouldn't survive without me. She sat down satisfied, like she just delivered the final blow in a long, one-sided battle. I could feel every eye on me, waiting for a reaction, anger, shame, desperation. But I gave them none of that. I simply nodded, took a sip of my wine and said calmly, Thank you for being honest, Olivia. That was it. No scene, no argument, because I knew something she didn't. The next morning, as expected, Olivia served me with divorce papers delivered with a smug smile and a reminder that her lawyer would be in touch regarding alimony. You see, Olivia was convinced that because her corporate salary was higher, at least on paper, I'd be obligated to pay her once the split was finalized. She underestimated me. Again, by Monday, my attorney, who I'd quietly hired months ago, filed our response. We disclosed my additional income streams: 5 years of private tutoring, 3 published novels, a bestseller generating royalties Olivia couldn't even fathom. And then came the documentation. I had meticulously kept records, screenshots, emails, even a journal detailing years of emotional abuse, public humiliation, and evidence of multiple affairs beyond the one I had originally discovered. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about the truth. When Olivia and her lawyer received our response, the smugness vanished overnight. I could tell because, for the first time in years, Olivia called me not to argue but to plead. Nathan, we don't have to make this ugly, she said, her voice softer than I'd heard in months. But it was too late for that. The moment she stood up at that dinner table and tried to shatter me in front of everyone. She made her choice. Now it was my turn. I always thought the worst moment in my life would be hearing my wife ask for a divorce. Turns out the worst moment was realizing I didn't feel a thing when she did. After Olivia's dramatic announcement at the reunion, I expected to wrestle with anger, sadness, maybe even regret. But all I felt was relief. The weight I'd been carrying for years, her constant belittling, the fake smiles, the nights spent wondering if I was ever enough, was finally gone. But that didn't mean it was over. When Olivia's lawyer sent over the official demands, I couldn't help but marvel at her audacity. She wanted alimony, half of our shared assets. And believe it or not, a portion of my future earnings, because as she claimed she had supported me emotionally through my career, I almost laughed. Supported me. The same woman who mocked me at every turn. This was the point of no return. I met with my attorney in his office downtown, a calmness settling over me that felt foreign but powerful. "She's banking on you folding," he said, scanning the paperwork. "But with your documentation, Nathan, we're not just defending, you're in a position to take control." I nodded. I wasn't interested in revenge for the sake of cruelty. I just wanted freedom and the dignity. Olivia tried to strip from me. The next few weeks were a blur of legal maneuvers. Every time Olivia tried to push, we pushed back harder. With facts, with evidence, with income streams she had no idea existed. It wasn't long before her lawyer's tone shifted. What started as aggressive demands quickly turned into quiet negotiations. But behind the legal battles, something else was happening. Something Olivia didn't anticipate. Word began to spread within our families. My parents, once heartbroken by Olivia's public humiliation of me, started to learn the truth. My sister called me one evening, her voice filled with disbelief. "Why didn't you tell us about everything you've been dealing with about the affairs? The way she treated you, I didn't have a good answer." Maybe part of me was ashamed. Maybe I thought enduring it made me stronger. But now they knew, and the more people learned, the more isolated Olivia became. Her perfect image, the successful wife burdened by a mediocre husband, was crumbling. Then came the final blow. During a settlement meeting, Olivia's lawyer, clearly exhausted by her dwindling position, brought up one last attempt to salvage something. "Well given, Mr. Harris's recent success as an author," he began carefully. "Perhaps there's room to discuss a share in the royalties considering the marriage duration." My attorney didn't flinch. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was proof that every book deal, every royalty check, every penny had been funneled through accounts established solely in my name, under my pen name, long before divorce proceedings began, legally airtight, completely untouchable. Olivia's face drained of color. For the first time, I saw fear replace arrogance. She realized she wasn't just losing control, she'd already lost it. By the end of that meeting, the agreement was clear. I kept my private assets. No alimony. No claims to future earnings. A clean break. But victories like that don't come without scars. Walking out of that office, I felt a strange mix of triumph and emptiness. 8 years of marriage reduced to signatures on paper and silent goodbyes. The man who walked into that marriage was gone, and in his place stood someone wiser, harder, but also freer. That was the moment I knew there was no going back. Not just from Olivia, but from the person I used to be. I wasn't the quiet, complacent husband anymore. I was a man who had weathered the storm and stepped out on his own terms. The funny thing about being underestimated, it gives you all the time in the world to plan. While Olivia spent years flaunting her success and painting me as the dependent husband, I was quietly building my exit strategy brick by brick. This wasn't revenge fueled by anger. It was precision, patience. I wasn't out to destroy her. I was out to free myself and protect everything I had worked for. The first step of my plan had started long before Olivia's public outburst. I knew that if she ever decided to pull the trigger on divorce, she'd aim for my supposed weaknesses, my salary, my perceived lack of assets, and her belief that I'd crumble without her. So I made sure my financial independence was hidden in plain sight. Every tutoring payment went straight into a separate credit union account under my name only. The book royalties funneled through an LLC tied to my pen name, completely legal, completely separate from any marital assets. I even kept records of my writing contracts, tax filings, and correspondence with publishers, all time-stamped and stored safely. But financial prep was only half the battle. I knew Olivia's pride wouldn't just let her walk away quietly. She'd try to spin the narrative, manipulate sympathy, and if cornered, lash out. That's why I documented everything. Every cruel remark she made at family gatherings, every condescending email or text message, the evidence of her affairs, screenshots, hotel receipts, and even social media interactions she thought I'd never see. It wasn't about airing our dirty laundry. It was about protection, ensuring that when the time came, I wouldn't be painted as the villain in her story. So when Olivia blindsided me at that reunion, I didn't react because I didn't need to. I already had the upper hand. Once the divorce papers arrived, I immediately activated the second phase of my plan, bringing in my attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense professional who specialized in high-conflict divorces. We laid everything out: my hidden income, streams, my airtight legal separation of assets, and the mountain of evidence proving Olivia's long-term emotional abuse and infidelity. Her lawyer tried every tactic in the book: stalling, intimidation, even subtle threats of going public with claims that I was financially dependent and would be nothing without Olivia's support. But every move they made, we countered, calmly, methodically. When they demanded alimony, we presented my income records. When they questioned the legitimacy of my book earnings, we showed contracts dating back years before the divorce proceedings. When they hinted at dragging my name through the mud, we reminded them of the documented affairs and how quickly public opinion could turn once the truth surfaced. It didn't take long for Olivia's confidence to crack. The woman who once stood over me with smug superiority was now scrambling to salvage what little leverage she thought she had left. But I wasn't finished. There was one final touch, a move I had debated but ultimately decided was necessary. I arranged a private meeting, not with Olivia, but with both of our families. I invited them over under the guise of clearing the air after the awkward reunion dinner. When everyone arrived, I calmly explained the reality of the situation. Not in anger, but with quiet resolve, I told them about the years of humiliation. The affairs, the truth behind our marriage. I didn't need to embellish; the facts spoke for themselves. My parents sat in stunned silence. Her family, once so eager to believe Olivia's narrative, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Olivia wasn't there to defend herself, and I didn't need her to be. This wasn't about shaming her. It was about reclaiming my voice. By the time the divorce was finalized, the damage to Olivia's reputation wasn't caused by me. It was caused by her own actions, finally exposed to the light. I walked away with my savings intact, my career thriving, and my dignity restored. And Olivia, she was left with nothing but the reality she had created: no more control, no more false superiority. It was over. And for the first time in years, I could finally breathe. 2 months after the ink dried on our divorce papers, I thought that chapter of my life was closed. I was wrong. It wasn't long before my phone started buzzing with messages, friends, colleagues, even former students reaching out with the same question: "Is this you?" I clicked the link they sent, and there it was, a full-page feature in a major newspaper. The history teacher behind this year's best-selling novel revealed my pen name, exposed my face. Smiling back at me in print, I had agreed to the interview weeks before, thinking it would be a quiet piece in a literary column. I didn't expect it to blow up across social media and local news outlets. By noon, my name was trending, and by evening, Olivia came crawling back. She didn't call, not after how we left things. Instead, I received a carefully worded email full of faux congratulations and a thinly veiled threat. She hinted that since my books were written during our marriage, she might have a claim to a portion of the royalties, even though the settlement had already made it clear she had no legal grounds. It was classic Olivia, grasping at anything she could spin in her favor. I forwarded the email to my attorney, who replied with a single sentence: "She has no case, ignore her," and I did. But karma wasn't done with Olivia. As my story gained attention, so did hers, but not in the way she wanted. People began connecting the dots. Mutual friends remembered her dramatic divorce announcement, the narrative she pushed about her dependent husband. Now those same people realized the truth: that while Olivia was mocking me publicly, I was quietly building a career she never saw coming. Her reputation took a hit. The corporate world she once dominated started whispering behind her back. Promotions she thought were guaranteed suddenly disappeared. Invitations to social events dried up. I didn't have to lift a finger. Olivia's downfall was entirely her own doing. Meanwhile, my life took a turn I never imagined. I took a sabbatical from teaching, something I could finally afford, and booked a one-way ticket to Europe. For years, I had taught about history from textbooks. Now I was walking through it. I spent months wandering through old cities, visiting landmarks I'd only read about, soaking in stories that would inspire my next book. But it wasn't just about research, it was about rediscovery. Away from the shadows of my past, I found clarity. I wasn't just Nathan Harris, the teacher who survived a toxic marriage. I was a man who turned pain into purpose. When I eventually returned to Portland, I didn't go back to my old life. I built a new one. I accepted a part-time teaching position. Not because I needed the money, but because I loved it. I stood in front of my students, not just as a teacher, but as proof that resilience, creativity, and quiet determination could rewrite any story. As for Olivia, the last I heard, she had switched companies and moved to a smaller apartment. Her world of control and image management had shrunk considerably. She tried once more to reach out, this time under the guise of closure. I didn't respond. Some doors are better left closed, permanently. Looking back, I realized that the true climax wasn't winning in court or watching Olivia's facade crumble. It was standing in front of that mirror, knowing I had survived and thrived without ever becoming bitter or vindictive. Justice had been served not through revenge, but through patience, preparation, and letting the truth do the talking. And that was more satisfying than any dramatic confrontation could ever be. If you asked me years ago what success looked like, I would have said a stable job, a happy marriage, maybe a house with a yard. I never imagined success would come wrapped in heartbreak, or that freedom would taste so sweet after walking through fire. Standing in my classroom today, I see things differently. My students think I'm just their history teacher. But sometimes between lessons about empires rising and falling, I slip in a quiet truth. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet choices you make when no one's watching. I don't tell them the full story, how years of being belittled by someone I loved nearly broke me, or how I spent 5 years building a lifeline in silence while wearing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. But I do teach them the most important lesson I learned. Never tie your worth to someone else's opinion of you. Olivia tried to define me by my paycheck, by how I looked on paper. But true value isn't measured in salaries or titles. It's in resilience, creativity, and knowing when to bet on yourself. Financial independence isn't just about money. It's about freedom. The freedom to walk away when respect is gone. The freedom to choose dignity over desperation. Looking back, I don't regret staying quiet all those years, because patience gave me something explosive. Anger never could control. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to humiliate her in return. All I had to do was be ready when the mask finally slipped. And when it did, I walked away with everything that mattered: my self-respect, my independence, and a future I built with my own hands. So if you're listening to this and find yourself feeling trapped, belittled, or underestimated, remember, this revenge doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes with a quiet smile, when you realize they have no power over you anymore. And that's the sweetest victory of all. What would you do if your spouse publicly humiliated you, thinking you had nothing without them? Comment below. I'd love to hear your story. And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge with Chris for more real stories where patience, resilience, and smart choices turn the tables.